From the grind to the glory, one man's journey proves that heart, hustle, and determination change the game. This is Catch as Catch Can with George Tinsley Sr., where adversity is met head-on and champions are made. Here's George.
Welcome to Catch as Catch Can. I'm George Tinsley Sr., former professional athlete, entrepreneur, author, and your host. This is a space where we sit down with leaders who face real challenges, learned real lessons, and kept moving forward.
Turning obstacles into opportunity.
Welcome to Catch as Catch Can. Today, we're facing one of those obstacles to opportunities. We've got a substitute host, our guest, to be with us today, as our regular scheduled guest has run into some difficulties. So today we'll be talking to Renee Hastings, who is quite a successful young lady, and Renee will be popping up here soon.
Hey, Mr. Tinsley, how you doing?
Great. How are you, young lady?
Glad
you could fill in for Mr. Stinson.
Well, I'm happy to be here. I know that technology can be our best friend, or technology can really cause us some challenges, but that's just kind of to be expected in this world of computers and people and that sort of thing. But I'm so excited to actually get to be on the other side of the camera from you, because I have had so many questions for you from the time we first started working together. We were introduced by the amazing Hutch, and I'm so excited to just come to know more about you. I've read your book, so inspiring, and yeah, I got questions.
Well, Renee, it's my pleasure, and as the host of the program here, Catch as Catch Can, and turning obstacles to opportunities, this is one of those opportunities that you and I get to converse and talk about some of your success and how you've made it to this particular point, and we can kind of go back and forth here and let our live audience here see what you've done and what you've accomplished with your career.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to sharing. It's been quite a journey, let me tell you, coming from being the granddaughter of a sharecropper from the South here in the United States. And my grandfather moved the family to the North to an Amish community in Wisconsin, which is where I was raised. My grandfather instilled in us a very strong work ethic. He taught us to be people who were reliable and dependable. And for people who are in listen only mode, being raised in an Amish community in Wisconsin, we really stood out because if you're in listening only, I'm Black, and my whole family is Black. And being raised in an all white community, we definitely stuck out. But my grandfather wanted to make sure that everyone's experience with us and people who look like us was nothing but excellent. So he instilled in us a very high standard of excellence. And that's pretty much the background that I come from. It was just expected that everything we did would be done with a level of excellence that was beyond reproach, because we were representing the family. I mean, the whole family was was being represented by every one of us. So it was just the norm for us to operate with excellence.
So how did you feel as you were entering into the school system and going through that and interacting with other people in the community? Were there other Blacks, if you will, in the no? Okay.
We were the ones and onlys.
Okay.
So yeah, if you saw another Black person around, they were family, like literally. Okay. And our town was so small. We literally had like a one-room schoolhouse. Do you remember that show, Schoolhouse Rock? It was kind of in between Electric Company and Sesame Street back in the day.
Okay.
And there was a one-room schoolhouse that was a part of the Schoolhouse Rock thing. Well, yeah, that was my school.
Wow. Wow.
And so, but it was red. And it was in a little town called Kingston. And that's where I went to, where I spent one of my elementary schools. And just being the only Black person. And I actually made friends with a little Amish girl, and she invited me to her house, and I was able to go over there. It was the first time I had pork chops and applesauce.
Wow. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
So, real quick, Renee, how did your grandfather wind up in that particular community and area?
So he was a sharecropper for a landowner named Jack Campnell.
Okay.
And Jack Campnell owned lots of land all over. And so my grandfather worked the land for him.
Okay.
How we got there.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Very interesting. And I'm sure there's a lot more, but I see that Darryll has joined us in the back in the studio, and we may want to bring him in here at some particular point and get into that program. But I'd love to have a lot of time to spend with you and learn more about your upbringing.
Yeah. So I'm just double checking my video settings to make sure that they are set the way that they are supposed to, and all my echo cancellations are off and all the things. So thank you, Darryll. And also let's go. So
we're ready.
Yeah, we can definitely maybe in post read the bio.
Okay.
So yeah, but that's kind of how my grandfather ended up in this Amish community in Wisconsin, and where I spent many summers. The land that we worked was growing mint, and so there was a planting season. There is a harvest, growing season, a harvest season. And at the end of the harvest season, we would extract the oils from these mint leaves that we, pulled out of the fields, acres and acres and acres of mint leaves, and extract the oil and sell it to a candy company. And that's how my grandfather took care of the family.
Outstanding. Very interesting. Okay, so we want to get into Darryll's background, bring him in at this particular point, and I'll introduce him. And Renee, thank you very much for filling in. Quite a story, and we look forward to hearing more and more about that. And tell us about your channel before you leave. Tell us about what you're doing, so that the audience can understand and look in on you also.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a podcast called Renee Speaks, and I started it when I was starting my business, Executive Help Now, because there were so many challenges starting a business and coming from corporate and the whole mindset shift. So anyways, I bring on subject matter experts to talk about everything business, so no one has to make the same mistakes that I made when I was getting started. And then out of that business came a second business called Live Stream Editors, where we offer done-for-you podcast production services. So that's pretty much me and who I am, and I look forward to seeing people on that side as well. And I want to also welcome Darryll to the show.
Good. Darryll, okay. We're going to bring Darryll on, Darryll Stinson. Darryll is the co-founder of Seeding Greatness, a movement helping leaders restore the planet and humanity through storytelling and transformational services. A former elite Division I athlete, best-selling author, and two-time TED and speaker with more than 2 million viewers. Darryll has turned personal adversity into a platform for leadership purposes and impact. He has coached hundreds of speakers to grow their business and reach millions through their stores. Welcome, Darryll, to the program. There he is.
Hey. We here.
Darryll, we're glad to have you. We had a beautiful young lady on a little earlier filling in for you, but
I could hear her. Hey, she wasn't filling in. She was stepping up.
Yeah,
you know how that is.
You know
how that is.
There you go.
She got in and sunk a 3 immediately.
Yeah. Well, Darryll, welcome to the program. We're live and want to get into your background. Excuse me. This program is Turning Obstacles to Opportunities. We'd like to hear about how you got started and some of the obstacles that you've had to overcome to get to the platform of where you are today.
Yeah, man, thank you so much for having me on. And people always ask me, how did I overcome this stuff? And it's like, where do we start? How much time do we have? I think the thing that feels most relevant for today's conversation is this conversation around athletes and these identity. And for me, my father played sports. He was a high level Division I athlete. It ran in my family. There's tons of athletes. And so I grew up in this low income community in Jackson, Michigan, home of Tony Dungy, by the way, shout out to him. And it was this pressure to sort of succeed in either sports or, if you went the street route, you had to be a rapper or selling drugs. And so I decided I didn't want to lose at anything. So I did all three. I sold drugs. I ran the streets. And then I also put a lot of sweat equity into athletics. And thank God, I was able to earn a Division I scholarship to play football at Central Michigan University. And I actually went there to play both football and basketball because I was, highly recruited in both sports. And so that was part of why I chose Central Michigan, was because they were going to allow me to play both sports. Otherwise I was totally chose a different school. Don't tell them that though. I know we're streaming. And so there was this tension with this identity of like, man, I'm right here. I earned a scholarship. My father didn't make it professionally, but here I am at the opportunity to play two sports, and it's guaranteed. A lot of promises in my ear from people who worked with athletes at the professional level in both sports, being like, man, you could leave early in football for sure. In basketball, you might need a couple of years to develop. And so, man, that was what I thought was going to happen until the back injury sort of, interrupted that story. And so I'll sort of pause there to, leave you some opportunity to respond.
Oh, we'll look for our audience to respond. We've got a little chat off to the side there. If anyone out there has any questions for Darryll as he tells us about his story. Darryll, Tony Dungy, you heard you mention his name. Tony lives down here in this area where I live and run across him occasionally. I had another great friend who played in the NBA by the name of Bob Elliott, who is from that area also, who is played in both the NBA and the ABA and now served on the board of the Retired Players Association with me for a number of years. Bob lives out in the Arizona area. But you mentioned some of the things that you did as a youngster before entering college. What do you say that kind of kept you going straight and not actually getting deeply involved in some of these vices that could have led to some jail time, if you will?
Man, thank you for that. And it's funny because my perspective on that has changed as I've grown in age and really share this story across the nation primarily. I haven't done a lot of international stuff. And one version of me would have said, what contributed to that was the upbringing. It was the fact that, it was not popular to be an emotional dude. And so me being creative, wanting to be a storyteller at my core, if I didn't walk around like I was ready to fight in the streets, that was often how I end up getting in a fight. It's like they thought that you could get picked on because you wasn't walking around ready to get picked on, And so it was just weird that I had to like toughen up in order to fit in and I would say survive, because they would have totally robbed you, stole your lunch money, took your shoes, anything you had valuable.
Right.
And so for me, I learned to like, hey, I cannot be my true self. It's not safe in the streets. It wasn't truly safe at home. And this is why I'm pausing, because, I got lots of story. parents, spanking me, telling me, I'll give you a real reason to cry, something to cry about. My father was always physically in my life, but he wasn't an emotional dude. So he didn't have no clue how to handle a lot of these feelings that I had. And so it was more like, hey, man, what you crying about? I grew up with sharing socks. I walked to school. You better go shovel some snow. You got it way more made than I had. So he didn't understand how to, connect with me emotionally in that way. And so I one version of myself would have said it's all that, right? It would have been like, it's all those things that I just mentioned. Another version of myself is, as I matured and taking more reflection around my own awareness in those moments. And as I've worked and poured into more youth and realized that they know more than they often take ownership of. They often are very insecure to share their best ideas because they're told, children are supposed to be seen, not heard. You sit over here, you take the smaller project, you're still getting mentored, you got a lot to learn. And all of that is true for sure. And there's some areas where they are highly specialized where we are not. And I'm not just talking about technology. I'm actually more so referring to, if I can dare say it, divine gifting. It is unique, authentic skill to one individual and what they bring to the environment that they step into. And so now I would say that what actually contributed to it was my lack of courage to be my authentic self, was my willingness to speak up when other people were remaining silent, was my inner my lack of tools to know how to sort through what was somebody else's projection of their failure, their limitations, their lack of emotional freedom and expression, and what was like actually my problem and issue to work through. And those tools and more started to help me see, actually, it wasn't my mom. It wasn't the construct. It wasn't the hood that I grew up in. It wasn't the teachers. It wasn't the thugs. It was me. And I had to take accountability over where I was not stepping into my authentic power, myself, my calling, my gifts, and really just acting like I knew why I was here on the planet.
Yeah. Listening to your story, and I think about myself, which I grew up in a tough area called Smoketown. Yes, in Louisville, Kentucky. And on my block, there was the prostitution house. There was the alcoholic that lived next door. There were the pimps that walked the street that were dressed, immaculate. They had that walk, and us as younger boys, we would try to emulate that walk. But it was those people really that, for me, that taught me that this is not the life that you want to get in. I mean, I actually had a prostitute one time tell me, "Hey, you need to get back on the other side of the street. That you're going to be somebody. You don't need to be here." And that really, it grabbed me. But it was those people in the neighborhood that I had best friend shot 8 times and killed one Saturday morning and so forth. So listening to your story, I recall those stories that happened that drove me to the basketball court, to where it was safe. There it was competitive, but it was a safe mode. And so I was. Those of you who are out there listening, there are all kinds of challenges that you run into. But the one point that you made, that it was up to you to make the right choice and put yourself in that path. So it's very interesting. So, where did athletics start to resonate and provide a path for you?
It was always there, man. I always involved. I was always tall, so they was like, put him in because he's tall. And I was so uncoordinated early on, and I actually used to get made fun of a lot because my dad was so athletic, and a lot of my family members. It wasn't just my dad. My dad gonna make you think it was just him, but it was a lot of us. And I wasn't athletic, man. I couldn't catch up with my height. And so it wasn't until 7th grade, probably, I dunked in the 7th grade. I was 6 foot already.
Oh, yeah.
Then I shot up to about 6'2", 3" by the time I hit like 8th freshman year. And then on sophomore, they was like, oh, he can dribble a little bit. He ain't just sit down there in the bucket. And so, man, it took off. And then AAU basketball set it off because I got around some people that was real competition and wasn't just like these local teams where you could only be as strong as the team you could flow in basketball, which was, one of my favorite sports. And that's really where I started to get known, I would say, is through basketball. It wasn't actually through football because our football team never won enough games to get noticed. We was just always getting stumped out. So nobody could see my athletic talent. So I would say right around 7th, 8th grade, I got in AAU sports. I started getting noticed, national radar. Then it was like, okay, I would have a scout pop up randomly at a game at my high school. And it was like a big deal because, anybody coming to our high school to see our team when we getting stomped. But it's like, no, they know they're here for me, and then I'm like all this pressure to perform. But I'm like, I got to succeed. Again, if I don't do it here with sports, I'm going to do it here in the streets. You know what I'm saying? I'm not staying broke, busted, disgusted, complaining. No way. I could not do that. It felt so oppressive to me. I just couldn't leave. I felt like I couldn't breathe in the atmosphere and the environment that I was growing up in.
Yeah. So Darryll, you're telling me that you were dunking in the 7th grade?
Yeah, I don't know if I dunked in the 7th grade. Yeah.
Wow. I'd say that's 6 foot.
I was like probably 6 foot, maybe 6'1". I don't think I was 6'1" yet.
That's some pretty good hops there, young man.
It was straight. It's so funny because again, if I got to do my streets justice, when you from the streets, the best athletes never get discovered.
Right.
So it was, I could dunk, but it was dudes that 7, they was like,
sure.
And I was like, I can't do that. I just got it in. But then by the time I got freshman, sophomore year, I was getting.
Yeah. So how are we doing academically as we're moving through?
Always smart enough to pass tests. It was so easy, multiple choice. I had visual memory, so a lot of the tests that we took, all they did was re-scramble the answers, and so I got by because I was like, oh, okay. And then I was very smart. I was very, very smart. And before I started skipping school in the 7th grade and getting involved in the streets and stuff, I was an all-A student, so. I think in 5th and 6th grade, I was already doing calculus and stuff. I was very brilliant. And my mom knew that about me. My mom was really passionate about education, and she was smart in her own right. She was always made me do my homework as soon as I got home from school. And so academics was always great. A's, B's. Sometimes I had a C here and there just because I just didn't show up to class and was skipping it. But I always figured out a way to pass my test. I graduated with a 3.2 or 3 GPA. And that was literally because absences and stuff like that. But I did really well on the ACT score. And I just think all of that came from the discipline that my mom instilled in me early. Was like, hey, you ain't going out. I don't care how bad you on. I don't care what your coach say, what time practice is. She's like, you doing that homework before you go out to practice. And it just made me do it enough to where I had to read the pages. I had to follow the blueprint. And then it's pretty simple, man. Education for me is like a very simple game. Yeah. I think they just make it complex and hard for people to navigate.
So during this period, Darryll, as you're making good grades, did the other kids give you pressure, make fun of you? How did that affect you?
Oh my gosh, man! Oh, calling me a white boy, making fun of the way white boy. All I heard was white boy, white boy, white boy. Oh, I don't know. I feel like I can't hear anything outside of that. It was like. White boy was just like the most insulting thing you could have said to me, I guess. And so there's a lot of other stuff that was said, but I think the biggest one that cut me was like white boy. And I'm like, white boy. I'm like, it was because it was the most idiotic. It was like, I'm not white, I'm clearly black. Which is hilarious because I would also get made fun of for being one of the darkest skinned people. So I was like, hold on, I talk white, but I'm too dark. What is going on? And so it created a lot of questions about myself. What's wrong with me? Why am I so dark? How come my mom not dark? How come my dad not dark? Is my dad my dad? Is my mom my mom? Is we're almost like I went through so many questions.
Mhm.
And because of all of that, it was just like I came to this really unhealthy conclusion that there was something wrong with me. Like literally something wrong with me. I wasn't supposed to be this way, act this way. I don't know if it's because mom and dad went together. I didn't know it's because I didn't know what it was. I just like I'm like you know, you make stuff and like a bad one came out the batch or something. Like I'm like that. Like I literally thought that about myself. And I think that's what made me start to become better as an athlete. Because it was like, I'll show them I'm worth something by how I perform. Because I noticed the better I got, the more they respected me, treated me like I was somebody. You know, I noticed that the girls who was calling me too dark or saying I was too white, they were saying I was cool and invite me and text me and hit me up on the private messages when I was in the newspaper. So I was like, oh, y'all like that, huh? I got more of that. And then I walk around with my jersey on, my shirt off. Then I just go dunk on somebody. I might, now you just all caught up in ego. But it got me out the streets. I say that. It got me out the hood. It gave me an opportunity to play at the next level.
Yeah. So that your self-esteem as it grew with your athletic skills that were taking you into a different levity, if you will. I think a lot of us go through that when you're excelling above the others at that early age. But as you begin to get your name in the newspaper and begin to star, so how did you what happened then in your life as you started looking at where you wanted to go?
It was just this narrative around basketball and football. Pick.
Okay.
And I was like, basketball. And it was like, you're 6'5", not 6'9". Your arms are long, but they're not abnormally long. Your hands are big. You can palm a basketball, but you can't hold. You see how your picture is. I can't catch as you can now.
Yeah.
and it was all that narrative. And a big part of that was because I was the tallest in my school and I was playing center. And that frustrated me because sometimes when I played AAU, I got the opportunity to play small forward, shooting guard. And I always felt like I could take off at those roles. But it's what people predominantly tell you. And so I would say it was all of that. And then it was like football, you're tripping. You could be a star. You're 6'5". You're fast as lightning. You're agile. You're strong. And you ain't even got meat on your bones yet. Wait till you put meat on them. And that's fact. My strength coach, Lawson, I'll never forget, freshman year, he was like, bro, I was 219. He was like, I want you to be 275 and running a 4.340. What?
What's he talking about?
What?
Yeah.
Hey, he was on a mission to make me that, bro.
Yeah. Certainly this is football.
And so that's where I went to scholarship, Central Michigan. They gave me a full ride. And Coach Butch Jones was my coach. And we had a really great team. A lot of athletes out of Florida recruited. Most people know Antonio Brown, but there was a bunch of them, about 17 of them. Jalil Adai, who's still he's doing broadcasting now. But there was some great athletes they went down there and got from Florida. And then they got the best from the Midwest. And I was one of them. And so we had a championship team. We almost won back-to-back years, but we won once. We beat Michigan State, was 23rd in the nation. And I ended up getting hurt. I actually, when the season that we were 23rd in the nation was my season, I was just basically on the sidelines the whole time because I had a back surgery and was just like literally trying to heal from it and come back while they were winning the championship. That also made it so hard. Is that it was like, man, everybody gets a ring, but it was like I wanted to be on there, not like I was a leader vocally, it was like, and again, I totally, trust my impact, but still the culture was like, we do not lose, we win.
Right.
And I think that was a big thing that definitely got, and I already was like that, but I was in sports team that was not like that. They were like, we lose because of the coaches. We lose because we're in Jackson. We lose because we're from this small town. I'm like, no. This team here, we don't lose. If we lose, it's a problem. Like they used to make we was running the next day, and that mentality it created a standard.
Mm-hmm.
We don't lose. Losing is because we slacked, we didn't study, we didn't research, and that's where a lot of that high performer came from.
Mm-hmm.
It was that standard that team set for me, and then my father was very similar. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
So we move up. So we're moving through college, and you. What position were you playing, by the way?
I played defensive end.
Defensive
in
end,
college.
okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we're moving through. You get hurt. You're kind of on the sideline, but the team's very successful.
Mm-hmm.
And you're transforming those skills that you're picking up there into your career. Start thinking in terms of next step, fallback position.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that.
So I had one dip where I went to the depression, came out of that, then applied the skills, and I go through the dip because when I dipped into the depression, I had a system of success. I was a top performing athlete. I was gonna go pro. And you can be successful at anything once you know that.
Right.
But I did not have a system of self-care. And so that's why I ended up depressed, and I didn't know who I was, and I was cut off from myself and my voice, my gifts, all those things. And so when I came out of that dip, I then had both. Mm-hmm. I then had system of success and system of self-care. And it was actually the combination of both that then I started to apply to the workforce, which was extremely important because I worked in higher education first. I was coordinator of content solutions. I worked for the marketing and communications department to do internal communications department to department, but also external, recruit and retain students. So it was a lot of communications, brochures, email campaigns, opt-ins, landing pages, all the things that go into that process with a university's budget to do so. Okay. And that was my first skill set. So I was highly good at communicating, and I was doing it in the written format because I was too insecure to do it verbally. And then I was using the system of self-care to notice that a lot of these people were working 60, 80 hours a week, and they had no self-care system. They weren't breathing. They weren't in nature. They weren't taking time for themselves. They didn't even know what purpose meant half the time because they were just trying to get a check. And so I was like having a better work experience because I had this system of self-care. And I was also, in my opinion, a better employee because I had a system of success. and so I was like noticing, man, I'm doing a lot more, a lot faster, a lot quicker. They slower. They didn't even go over the meeting notes last week. Oh my God. We had to watch practice every single practice. And they not even reviewing the meeting notes. That is a cardinal sin. You know what I'm saying? I'm over here reading every single detail, got the line, did the research, came to the next meeting for prep with more notes. And they're like, all right, last week's meeting notes.
Yeah.
And so that agitated me. And I was like, I got to go. God's called me to more. And so I left there. I got into speaking with a lot of athletic teams. A lot of people kind of knew I was highly recruited. I don't know how the word got out. Word got out kind of. So they was like, hey, man, share the story. What happened? I heard you went through a little dark time or whatever. And so I started to share that. And I think more of it was that they knew I was in the streets and they saw I wasn't anymore. They saw I was in the churches and stuff. And so I was doing churches, athletic teams. And then when I left CMU, I got my first paid speaking engagement because one of the interns ran a marketing conference, the Department of Health and Human Services. And they needed a marketing speaker. And I came and I did a marketing presentation. They paid me $500. And that felt like I was rich because it was like I did 30-minute speech, got $500. And I was like, oh, that's way more than this 60 grand a year. Uh-oh. I'm like, now we talking. And then, I realized I was way undercharging very soon. And so that was my intro. And I went a couple years doing, I really went 7 years doing marketing consulting. And then I was pastoring in church on staff at some point. Sometimes they had a salary, sometimes they didn't. And I would always supplement my staff salary with my speaking income and my consulting income. So I did that for 7 years. And then my TED Talk came out. And it was the first time I felt like the broader world heard that mental health story. because I would only share it in the churches, and I would only share it in athletes in action and FCAs that would let me do the faith stuff. And so it was a way to get an emotional message in the marketplace that wasn't marketing for me. And people were like, yeah, it was so helpful. Thank you so much. Help me. Come talk to my athletes. Come talk to our educators. Hey, that helps us in corporate. And I just kept saying yes. And the demand got too big where I couldn't be both in the church ecosystem and then also in the marketplace, if you shall. And then I just went back like essentially full time into entrepreneurship. That was about 2019. And then been running ever since. Since my TED went viral, I got all these demands from people internationally to help them communicate. They were like, how did you do that? Who helped you? Who coached you? I was like, me. And so I started coaching all these communicators who were trying to get, people from everywhere. Technology, education, health and wellness. There was so much stuff. I didn't even know what they did. And I had to do hours and hours of research to help them simplify it and say it in a compelling way and not sound like a robot in a script. Right. And for them, that was worth a lot more than the money. They needed the help. And so I started to get paid more for high specialized consulting. And that helped me to see my gifts in a different light. I learned that it's not just, are you valuable? It's, are you valuable to the person who you're selling to? Right. Sometimes it's not your value. It's that the person you're selling to doesn't value that service at that level. So you just got to find a different market or different people, and they might pay you a different price. Yeah. And so I learned that about my skill set. And then I started to teach other people the same thing. It was deeply empowering to be like, I can command business, move communities by using my story, my voice. How do I do that? And so I started to help more people do that. And then I launched this community, Seeding Greatness, which is a community of entrepreneurs who meet in person here in Franklin, Tennessee region each month. And then there's a virtual meeting that we have in between our monthly meetings where we connect, collaborate, and condense time. And that happens because we literally go multi-industry, multi-generation, but then we also use multi-levels of facilitation. Okay, meaning music, interaction, pair and shares debriefs, collective wisdom. A lot of corporate conferences and environments, when you go to a conference, it's all about the panelists. It's all about, right now, people may assume this is all about you and I and our conversation. If we wanted to condense and collapse time, we could open it up to the audience, not just to harness our wisdom, but to start to share theirs. And what that would do is it would now give people faster solutions, better solutions, because the solution is only as powerful as somebody's ability to apply it to the business they're in and the season that they're in. So it's not just, is that a great principle? It's, is it applicable to my business and my season or my life and my season, whatever you're like trying to learn? And when we collectively bring our resources together, there's just more buttons on our human controllers. We got more resources, so we can be more resourceful. So that's what I'm testing by getting us together and allowing my influence with all of these people. When a lot of people, my skill set, they basically just, make a price tag to have access to the higher level of the echelon of the relationships I have nothing wrong with that. We still want to create spaces where if you only want to be around 7 9-figure founders, you can only be around 7 9-figure founders. But what Seeding Greatness is about is cross-pollinating our greatness. What happens when we let humanity be humanity and actually help and serve one another sacrificially in abundance, facilitate it around a theme that I usually pray and get from God, but I tell the market that's just about business and economic times and relevancy. And that has essentially caught fire here and created a lot of interest nationally.
That's outstanding, Darryll. I want to go back one key thing that I think we that I want our audience to make sure that they understand. At some point there, you went from we got to win. We're
Yep.
we're going to win, and then you got into the faith side
Yep.
and your pastoral side. Tell us
Yes.
how that transition happened, because that, to me, it sounds like that's where the fire really lit and things started to open up and creating that path to your next step. But it was that period, at least that's what I heard.
Yeah.
That period that opened up. Tell us about that.
It was all of it, man. It was all of it. Every seed was used. And that was a big part of it. Number one, it did two things for me in the church. The first thing it did is it allowed me to talk about my faith. Mm-hmm. And for me, that was a freedom I needed to do. That was the secret. It was like they're hiring me in marketing, they're hiring me in business, they're hiring me in consulting. They should just listen to the Lord. And even when I started, coaching a lot of believers and things, I still learned that it was about my discipline, my connection with God, my discernment, that they really valued. They really valued having that voice in their life. Even though I was this young, wild dude, I got an old soul. Yeah. And so they was like, man, thank you. I felt like a father. I felt like a grandfather. I felt like a brother. I felt like a confidant. And so it gave me the ability to just really have the real conversation around what makes mm-hmm. life and everything work is mm-hmm. obedience. Mm-hmm. The other thing that it did for me is when you spoke at a church and in the environments I was in early, it was primarily early. Once I started to expand, it wasn't so intense. But in the ones that I started with, charismatic circles, you had to have a word from God. It was, did God say that to you, or is that your opinion? Mm-hmm. And it was a great amount of responsibility to make sure that you did your diligence to stay to the word and hear in God in prayer enough that you gave them God's word and not your emotions.
Yeah.
Trauma.
Yeah.
And that is still a standard I try to hold today as much as I can. Mm-hmm. I know I have to have a line when people pay me to do a business thing. I got to make sure that they're not getting like bait and switched, So I'm making sure that never happens with any audience, or I would lose my credibility, my reputation. And I think a lot of people that hire me often know that they trust me enough to go a little off script, to share some things that I feel like are on my heart for this moment. And so if I didn't have that ability to do that in the church, I wouldn't have that skill set to do that in the marketplace. It wouldn't exist.
Mm-hmm. Very, very important. Mm-hmm. Very important. So today, tell us today, we had your sites flash up again. Can we get those back up again so people can see what Darryll is doing and how to get in touch with him? Here we go. Walk us through this, Darryll.
Oh man, this is me. That's my Facebook, just Darryll Stinson or Stinson Speaks, depending on what platform you're in. This is Facebook. I'm Googleable. There's Instagram. I say, man, we're doing a lot of shares from our events, and then from our the speaking in our podcast on Instagram, and LinkedIn is all speaking, baby. That's corporate speaking. I do try to put some live stuff on there, but it just doesn't perform well or get much visibility. So I just try to keep business over on LinkedIn. And then YouTube, you can't tell me what to do over here. Okay. I'll make anything, post anything, podcasts, videos. Like if you just want the unfiltered truth right now, they're not censoring me. So I'm just speaking my heart, sharing the secret. I'm also letting people share theirs. Here, can I just say this? Sometimes when you interview people, they say things that you don't agree with. But the podcast is not the time to correct the guest unless they just said something like very, very, very dark. And so because I have a wide range of relationships, sometimes people can hear conversations on that podcast that I want to say, focus on what we have in common, not what we have in difference. Okay. And so that would be the place to connect with me there. And obviously they put on my website, all that stuff. And so I appreciate y'all very diligent on that. But man, I know that I hope people retune into this conversation. I think it's great to watch men, brothers have a conversation, generations. I think we had multiple layers and levels of it: spiritual, athletics, emotional, self-care, even communication, speaking, using influence to build marketplace impact, community building. I mean, this was a very rich discussion for many, many people. And I just hope that we can get the right eyes on it, because I just think so many more people need to hear they are not alone, man. There's no expectation and pressure to be anything that you have not been born to be. And then also go get everything that belongs to you. You know, like now I wish the NIL rules was around when I was coming up. Oh come on.
Yeah. Well, Darryll, I tell you, we have really enjoyed having you on the program today. Sorry about the glitches earlier.
Oh, that was me. Yeah.
We got you here, and it was very, very impactful. I think everyone listening in has really gained something and know where to reach out to you to gain more. And what you're doing, young man, just continue to do it. Continue to spread it out. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate y'all. Thank you for the team, everything. Y'all handle it like absolute professionals. But what can you expect?
Yeah,
that's what pros do.
Thank you, sir. All right. We've had a great conversation today with Mr. Darryll Stinson, and wishing him the very best in his success. And certainly those of you tune in to Catch as Catch Can and see what we're doing here. So Darryll, thank you, and have a wonderful day.
Love y'all, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
This has been Catch as Catch Can. The game isn't over. Your success story is just getting started. Head to tinsleyspeaks.com for exclusive content, resources, and opportunities. Catch as Catch Can with George Tinsley Sr., a production of Live Stream Editors.